Hello, Husker fans. This is the Pick Six podcast, along with Evan Bland. I'm Sam McKewon. Evan does not have a background today. Welcome. We will be joined by Abby Barmore here in about 25-30 minutes. We'll talk a lot of Husker football once she comes aboard. Full week of talking to coaches. Kind of a week of people talking a lot of good stuff about the offense, which I thought was interesting. So we'll talk a lot about that. We'll talk about the 8 players that we're going to be watching for at the open spring practice on Saturday. We each got kind of some names to go over. And then we'll talk just about, where Nebraska's recruiting. So recruiting is really going to heat up. It's already heating up, but now with the sort of dead period lifted as of June 1st, which we've known was going to happen for weeks, and with some other changes in place, it's going to be fast and furious in recruiting. And so Abby talked to a couple of kids from Kansas, and then we'll be able to talk just about a lot of the official visitors that they have coming in June, and then maybe some of the guys coming for the spring game. So we'll have plenty to talk about, and we want to always remind people, but we're going to start with baseball and basketball here in a minute. We always want to remind people that the Pick Six podcast is brought to you by Team Schwabach. The Schwabach Agency is a family-owned and all-state insurance agency with 4 licensed insurance pros, saving thousands of Nebraska Husker fans money. They sell homeowner, auto, life, and flood insurance across Nebraska, and they also insure all the big boy toys. Not sure those will get played too much this weekend because of the rain. Motorcycles, boats, RVs, off-road vehicles. If you've had your roof replaced in the last 5 years, give Daryl Schwabach, Kyle Schwabach, Nancy Mostick, or Kyle Murdoch call at 402-590-5200. They can help you save a bundle. Free, no obligation insurance reviews and quotes. They're going to make sure all their fellow Nebraska fans are properly protected. You can reach them at 402-590-5200 or www.nebraskaallstate.com. That's www.nebraskaallstate.com. Thank you to Team Schwabach. All right, Evan, let's talk a little bit of baseball to start off here. We're going to wait for Abby to talk about 45 minutes, good hour of football. But we're going to start with baseball. The Huskers are the number 1 team in the Big Ten. Not by a lot. Michigan's right there nipping at their heels. And in a couple of polls, Michigan is still ahead of Nebraska, which kind of surprises me a little bit. But the Huskers start a 3-game, or is it a 4-game series at Penn State this weekend? It's 3 games, right? Or is it
4 games? Yep.
Okay. So they're going to the Nittany Lions. Interesting weekend against Maryland. I was out there for a couple of them. Fun to watch Nebraska in person. That was helpful. And there were some fun games. I mean, they were legitimately fun games, and Nebraska got elite pitching in 2 of those games.
They did. And I think that's the main takeaway, honestly, is what they did on the mound, because, you look at their body of work to this point, the defense continues to be solid. The offense, I think, has really established itself. I mean, it is what it is. It's going to score runs. It's going to be aggressive. It's going to be diverse in how it does that. But to me, the ceiling of this team at this point is going to be based on what they can get from their pitching. And so Maryland was a great kind of litmus test for that as the number 2 scoring offense in the Big Ten behind Nebraska. And so for me, it was not just would they win the series, but how would they do it? And I think how they did that, winning 6-2 on Friday, and then Shanneman having the strong Sunday game, holding them to, I think it was 3 runs. That's really encouraging, because those guys at Maryland, they can swing the sticks. They're similar to Nebraska in terms of the different ways they're able to produce runs. So with Cade Povich, Chase Shanneman having good outings, that was, I think, really encouraging for what this team can be. Chance Roach on Saturday had a bit of a rougher outing, and the thing with him every week is going to be, is his sinker sinking? And if it is, he's going to get a ton of weak ground balls, and he's going to be the guy that had a ton of success at New Mexico State. And if he's not getting that sink on that pitch, guys are going to square up that ball and line it all over the field. And so that's what we have seen the last few weeks. Illinois did that to him. Maryland did that to him. And so
should Nebraska have pulled, I don't know how many pitches into his BP warm-up he was in, but Roach had given up, I think, 4 hits in a row, and he wasn't pulled. And the Maryland guy hits a huge home run. Should he have been pulled from that guy after those 4 hits in a row? Whatever. He was getting laced around the park pretty good.
He was. Yeah, I mean, I thought so. I thought it was time for him to get pulled at that point. And the bullpen is still, it's still above average, I think, but it's not quite where you want it to be. This is where you'd love a guy like Colby Gomez to be able to come in and throw mid-90s. They haven't had him. He's out this year. I think Kyle Perry's imminent return here in the next few weeks is going to be big. He was a left-hander who was on pace to be a weekend starter for them this year before he had Tommy John surgery last summer. They're looking at him for maybe that Rutgers series at home to open the month of May. And so that could be a big shot in the arm for that relief core for Nebraska too. But yeah, I mean, obviously you love what Spencer Schwellenbach's doing at the back end. He's elite as a closer, as a 8th or 9th inning guy. Guys like Caleb Feakin, Tyler Martin, Braxton Bragg have been pretty good. But everyone needs more arms. You need more depth. But I still think you look at that series and the way that they won it overall, you got to be encouraged by that. Now it sets up really interesting where you have Penn State and Michigan State on the road. And those are the last 2 series for sure that Nebraska is going to be judged by before the NCAA announces the regional sites coming up after that. So when you talk about the potential of postseason baseball at Haymarket Park, the schedule sets up really well for Nebraska in the sense that it can continue to stack wins, giving it a very good chance to have the best record in the Big Ten before all of those challenging series in May come, the Indianas, the Michigans of the world, Northwestern, surprisingly enough. So these next couple of weeks to me are about just continuing to win those series, stacking wins. And if you do that, you get to host postseason ball at Haymarket Park for the first time since 2008, and then things get really interesting down the stretch.
How can the NCAA committee, how many schools are getting regionals?
16.
Okay. How could the NCAA committee give Nebraska a regional when they're 73rd in the RPI? Because if you give them a regional, aren't you guaranteeing that they're going to make the NCAA tournament? You're basically saying you're in the NCAA tournament, right?
Not necessarily. I mean, that's unique to this year, of course. Usually you complete the conference tournament weekend in late May, and then that's when it all comes out. Who made the tournament, who's hosting, who are your top national seeds and all that. But yeah, I mean, it's different this year because they want to predetermine the sites for health and safety reasons related to COVID.
Okay.
So it's interesting because in theory, Nebraska could host, and then they could run into a meat grinder of a schedule in May and, be a 2 or a 3 seed in their own regional, or they could, if they really bottom out, could miss the postseason altogether. I don't anticipate
being a 2 in the regional is not a big deal. I think that's fine. You don't think they're going to be a number 1 seed in the region, do you? Even if they get it.
I mean, if they win so let's back up. I mean, the RPI, I know people are still referencing that. It's obsolete for the Big Ten this year. Like, I haven't looked at the RPI once in the last month.
Is it obsolete for the NCAA tournament committee, or is it obsolete because the Big Ten decided to opt out of playing non-conference games?
It's just not an accurate measuring stick for the Big Ten. Like, it's an echo chamber. If all the Big Ten teams are only playing each other.
I appreciate that. According to you, it's not an accurate measure. Does the NCAA tournament committee view it as an accurate measure?
Well, I mean, I suppose they could look at that, but it would not be accurate if they did. I have not talked to a committee member, and I don't know that they're not doing that. But yeah, I mean, it doesn't make sense to view it that way.
I agree with you.
So I suppose
that doesn't mean it won't be viewed that way.
I suppose it's possible. You never know.
I don't know. I have no idea. I have no clue. I wouldn't surprise me if the NCAA tournament committee penalized the Big Ten for refusing to play non-conference games. I'm not even sure that would be an unworthy penalty, to be very honest with you, because if we're going to get right down to brass tacks, if all 14 Big Ten coaches had said, hell no, we're playing a non-conference game, what do you really think that the presidents and the chancellors were all going to just, the Big Ten may very well get penalized for this. It's possible.
Maybe, but you can make the counter argument too that what Nebraska loses in some big non-conference games, they gain by playing, what would it be, 20 more league games than they would normally. Normally, it's a 24 game Big Ten schedule. You're talking 44 games now.
Yeah.
And so I think that's been interesting when you evaluate teams in the Big Ten and you look at even the statistical numbers and you match those up nationally. Yes, you're only playing league, you're not playing maybe those elite non-cons, but those stats are also not boosted by the midweek Northern Colorado games or playing, whoever else that you might play in the area that you pound.
Agreed.
As the more talented team. So I think there's, a middle ground there somewhere, but
I agree.
So again, yeah, I can't tell you that the NCAA tournament committee would say, hey, yeah, we're not looking at RPI. I guess I don't know that, but certainly, it just wouldn't make sense to evaluate teams that way. It's going to be based on wins and separating yourself in the standings. And I think we've seen in some of the national projections that teams are doing that. Michigan, Nebraska, Ohio State, when they swept Indiana in 4 games a few weeks ago, they put themselves on the radar. Indiana right now is the fringe, kind of that number 4 team. So I've always been of the opinion that the Big Ten is going to get 3 into the postseason.
Sure.
They've had 5 the last handful of years. They've proven themselves that they're a deeper league, or that at least they're on par with the Pac-12 and the Big 12 and conferences like that. So I guess we'll see. Again, for Nebraska, if you just keep winning the series, keep stacking wins, you can't worry about the RPI or anything else. That's what's in front of them.
If they make a regional, if Nebraska gets to host a regional, and then Nebraska makes the regional, Nebraska will play in its own regional, and it really doesn't matter whether they're the number 1 seed or not. They're going to have a huge home field advantage, and you pity the number 1 seed that has to come to Nebraska and nominally be the number 1 seed while simultaneously not being the number 1 seed. I mean, for argument's sake, let's say a team comes to Nebraska as a number 1 seed. I don't even know who, Baylor, and Nebraska's a number 2 seed. Well, Nebraska's a number 1 seed. I mean, they're playing at home. They're familiar. If Nebraska has to play Baylor and there's 5,000 people in the crowd and there are 99% Nebraska fans, that isn't a number 1 seed. That's what'll be interesting to see how they determine the regionals, because I would think that they would try to project in their mind's eye the 16 number 1 seeds, but maybe not.
Well, yeah,
if they do that, then of course we're talking about, what is it? 9, 10 SEC teams being number 1 seeds, that kind of stuff, like Arkansas and Vanderbilt, and Mississippi State. Like, it'd be the usual group of teams getting to host what they always host. I'll just be curious to see what happens.
And it sounds like a lot of is merit based. Like, how was your team doing at that point? But it does sound like, too, some of it from national reports is going to be wanting to spread things out geographically a little bit more than they normally would. So that plays to Nebraska's favor. Obviously, Haymarket Park's facilities are right up there in the region in terms of capacity to host and all the amenities and things like that. So, it'd be a big deal, I think, for Nebraska's program. I mean, and not just for that moment, but you think, again, they haven't hosted since 2008. How much has changed in the world since 2008 in terms of social media, in terms of how college baseball is televised, how many games are put out there now. And so when I look at kind of the rise of Nebraska baseball, like that, to me, is that next big step is, all right, they're starting to stack wins. They're contending for the conference. They're pretty clearly looking like a postseason team right now. But if you can get that home series and you can really start generating excitement within the fan base, within recruits that can see that and see what that's like that's when the thing can really take off. So I think there's more than just this season kind of in the mix here. I think that it's the next big thing that can really help this program really soar.
Completely agree. Abby has joined us. Good morning, Abby.
Good morning.
We're going to talk football in a minute, Abby. We're talking about baseball and then basketball, and then I'm going to sandwich in just a little bit of volleyball here. We don't talk a ton of volleyball on the Pick Six podcast. We'll probably try to have Lincoln Arneal on next week if Nebraska makes the Final Four, or maybe even just to wrap up the season. Nebraska is in the round of you tell me if I've got this right. They're in the round of 16 after sweeping Texas State yesterday, and they're going to play Baylor on Sunday. If they win that, they're likely going to play Texas in the Elite Eight. again, the expectation for Nebraska volleyball is really nothing short of the Final Four. In most circumstances, they're Alabama football, Clemson football, Duke basketball, whatever you want to call it. That's what they are. That's their standard. And so anything short of that will be a disappointment, especially in Omaha. If they're able to get to the Elite Eight, I think that match then goes into the CHI Center. And then obviously the Final Four is in Omaha as well. And so the thing I think probably to watch on Sunday is whether Lauren Stivrins is completely healthy at that middle blocker spot. They were able to replace her in the third set with Callie Schwarzenbach, which is good. But at the same time, to win the very best matches, you have to have your very best player on the court as long as humanly possible. And that's Stivrins. She's the best player on the team, sort of the heart and soul of that crew. Although Maddie Kubik, by the time she's done in 4 years, might be one of the 5 or 6 best players Nebraska's ever had. At this point, Stivrins is in that sort of echelon, and so it'll be important for her as the matches progress to be able to play as much as possible. We'll just have to see. I watched a little bit of it on ESPN yesterday, and I'll just say that the visuals are unique. It looks like they're in Convention Room C, and then right after the game, they're going to go ahead and have a boating convention in there or something. It's just it's an interesting environment. They're doing the best they can. The NCAA's made some mistakes along the way. They certainly did with women's basketball, and I think they made a few slip-ups here in volleyball as well. But it appears that the teams are on their way. We'll try to have Lincoln in next week to kind of unpack the whole thing. But Nebraska volleyball continues to do what they do. They're an elite program, and we'll see where it goes from here. I think they'll probably have a tough match against Texas if Texas is the team they face. I think that'll be a battle. Number 5 seed against the number 4 seed. And then if I had to make a prediction, I think you're going to see at least 2 and perhaps 4 Big Ten teams in the Final Four. I think it's very possible, especially if Purdue gets past Oregon. They will play Kentucky, and I'll take Purdue. And then, of course, Wisconsin's the number 1 seed. Minnesota's the number 3 seed. Nebraska's the number 5 seed. If all those teams win, plus Purdue, you could have an all Big Ten Final Four.
And I would just add, I think it's especially an interesting year for Nebraska because you think of all the matches that they didn't get to measure themselves against with Wisconsin, with Penn State. Like usually going into the tournament, okay, they've beaten these teams and they're legitimate national title contenders, or they haven't, and you can kind of get a sense of what their Sam turned off his video instead of his sound, so we got the full.
I'm sorry. Yes, that's right. I blew my nose.
we got the full effect there, but I just think it's especially intriguing this year because of all those matches that we didn't get to see earlier.
Right.
Like how wide the range of outcomes appears to be for Nebraska. Like, can they come together and beat some of those teams like Wisconsin? We don't know. So what better time to find out potentially in the NCAA tournament?
Yeah, I think it would be good to play Wisconsin just the one time and play them in a hostile court for Wisconsin, which is exactly what they'll do. They'll have them in an environment where the stakes are really high. Nebraska will have a huge home court advantage if it gets to this, and they won't have played at all this year. Wisconsin took Nebraska to the woodshed last year, 9-0 effectively. I mean, I believe it was 9-0, 3-0 in matches, but 9-0 in sets.
Yeah.
So that wasn't close. I mean, 9-0 is not competitive. Let's be honest. So I think Nebraska having to not have to do that this year, where I think they probably would have lost a couple against Wisconsin, probably a good thing. Play them in a high stakes scenario where you've got the court advantage, and a lot of those conference dynamics get thrown out the window. It's just an effective moment. So we'll see. We'll see what happens. We'll see. I'm going to move on to basketball. We'll start with women's basketball real quick. Incidentally, the Nebraska women's basketball team added a player, and she's really good. Jazz Shelley is her name. She was probably the best guard in Australia in terms of recruit in the last 4 or 5 years. She played with Isabel Bourne on a couple of teams and was really one of the best players in the world at her age. I think she scored 18 points in a really big game. So she was on an elite Oregon team 2 years ago. the one that had Ionescu, and they were elite. And unfortunately, there wasn't anything they could do about that with COVID. So that was a shame. And she hit 10 3-pointers in a game. And then this most recent year, they had kind of a stacked team again. They didn't have, the superstar, but they, she got hurt. She started 11 games. Anyway, Nebraska just picked up a really, really good player. And I think one of the reasons, and I haven't talked to Jazz yet, but once I do, I think I'm going to find out that the biggest reason, or one of the biggest reasons she's here, is because of Bourne, which is good news for Nebraska. So Izzy Bourne sticking around, that's good. With the transfer rule changing yesterday, you just don't ever know. Isabel Bourne could go play in Connecticut and start. So they've got a really good player. So Bourne sticking around, that's good. Shelly joining the team is going to be good too. She'll probably be a starter. So she'll be immediately eligible, and probably one of the better players on the team, I would suspect. Double-digit scorer. Maybe lead the team in assists. You just never know. So that's a big deal. The Nebraska men's basketball team is in an interesting spot. Fred Hoiberg talked to us for about 20 minutes yesterday, and here's what I'll say. They added a guard they really wanted in C.J. Welcher, a 6'5" guard out of Xavier, a freshman. And they wanted this guy. They feel like he can come off screens. He can hit shots at all kinds of angles. This is a guy that I don't know that Nebraska's really had for recently. I don't want to overdo that, but Welcher is a guy that really can, he can run off multiple screens. He can pick and pop. And he just has a smoothness to his game. I didn't always do that at Xavier because there was a guy in front of him. But he's a good addition. He's a little bit different addition than I think Nebraska's even had here recently. And I know they really like it. They basically made him their top priority as soon as that portal season started. So they got Welcher. And then they signed, another post in Oleg Kohenets, 7-footer from Lithuania. Interesting addition. I asked Hoiberg yesterday how capable this kid's going to be to play right away. And he's like, well, we'll bring him in, see who earns the minutes. And strength is always an issue. Yeah, it is. It's an interesting addition because I don't know that they went in to the recruiting portal season necessarily looking for a third post. I don't. That's not necessarily the vibe that I got. Because they had 3 posts, right? And Ivan left because it was pretty clear that Ivan wasn't going to play much. And so now you've got Derek Walker for at least one more year. And Nebraska, on the believes it could be 2. And then Eduardo Andre, who they really like. So Kohenets is going to have to find a way to play alongside that. Maybe you need 3 posts. I know Baylor used 3. One of them was undersized, and then they had 2 other guys. But that's what they signed yesterday. And then Hoiberg was asked a good question about whether they were going to continue to pursue a point guard. And, Hoiberg kind of, what do you want to call it? He doubled down. He decided that they might just stick with the guys they got, which is interesting. It's really interesting. Delano Banton, Trey McGowan's, that means basically those 2 guys are going to run your point. And then Kobe Webster, can help. And then they brought up Wilhelm Breidenbach, 6'9" freshman who's coming in as a potential option to do that too. But it was interesting. And
there's some decisions to be made there yet, right? Thor still has to make a call on whether he's coming back and some other things go on too.
Thor is in the process of determining whether he's going to come back for another year or go pro. And then Shamil Stevenson is as well. Shamil's the oldest guy on the team, even though he's a junior. In basketball, sometimes you look at how old they are versus the year they are, because basketball, these guys enter at all different times into the process. So, for example, Shamil is 15 months older than Kobe Webster. So Kobe's going to be a 5th-year senior. Shamil's going to be a 5th-year junior. I'm sorry, a 5th-year junior. And Shamil's a year, 14 months older. So that's just kind of how that sport works. So Stevenson's looking at his options. I don't know that his pro stock's going to change a lot. And then Thor as well. Now, Thor could transfer. In theory, he could transfer and go somewhere else. Shamil really can. He's transferred multiple times now, so he's not going to get a waiver, really. So he's going to either have to decide to come back or go pro, transfer. I don't know where he'd go. But it's an interesting team. I think they feel like they've got a lot of cohesion. And the question, to some degree comes back to Banton. This is a guy they really believe in. They have believed in him since they signed him. They believed in him during the sit-out year. And then they certainly believed in him going into 2020. COVID hit. They have a month-long pause. Banton was probably the most affected by that process because, he didn't have access to a lot of strength and conditioning facilities. Nebraska basketball did not have full access to the training table the way that Nebraska football did because of the isolation that they were trying to pull off. And so, imagine a situation where, instead of being able to go through the entire buffet and kind of pick what you want, you're kind of giving them one option a day. Now, if it's shrimp and grits, Evan's going to be happy on one day, right? Right out of left field. But there's going to be something else that you bring up that, you may not like. And so what do you do? So that's kind of the things that were happening. I think Banton with full access to the training table, they have a very different kind of strength coach now than they previously had. The way I would describe the guy they previously had is he knew his stuff, but he was kind of an odd duck. The guy they have now is designed to connect with the players. And then they added an assistant coach that Fred Hoiberg is very high on, and Nate Lenzer, who is kind of a developmental guy who's designed to gain trust with the players and really work with them. And I don't know that Nebraska, Doc Sadler is a great mind, an elite mind, and will remain sort of their defensive coordinator. But at the same time, I think Lenzer is expected to unlock some of these potentials for these other players. And so I think if you put all those pieces together, the thought process is we're going to be a better team next year with a guy like Nate Lenzer and Kurt Joseph as the strength coach and the training table. And Delano Banton's going to be the guy that we anticipated he would be if last year hadn't been such a weird year.
Yeah, that'll be interesting to see how that shakes out. And the end of the dead period, that's pretty impactful on the basketball side too, yes? As they start to craft future classes.
So the end of the dead period is June. You're going to see evaluation periods kick up again. There's a summer hoop circuit that kicks into gear. There's multiple leagues, Nike, Adidas, Under Armour, they all have their own leagues. And it's really important for coaches to be able to go out and see that and to be able to go and physically be at the courts versus trying to watch videos. That's not always easy to do. So yeah, that's going to be a big deal, is to be able to have, some of these systems in place and be able to go out and watch the kids. It will help with their 2022, 2023 recruiting process. I think that it'll be a big help there. Whether or not, they recruited quite well during COVID. They really well. They did really, really well. They got Bryce McGowan, they got Breidenbach, co-heads, but they got CJ Welcher, and they did quite well during COVID. So you can't really say that it hurt them that much. Maybe it did, but they were solid. And so, but nevertheless, you can go out and maybe get your eyeballs on a guy that maybe somebody doesn't know that much about. And, you can make a play for him, so on and so forth. I think it'll probably help the women's basketball program a little bit more because I think there's some situations where you want to be able to go out and build some relationships and, especially with some of the local kids. The 2022 and 2023 and 2024 classes in the state of Nebraska are going to be pretty good. I think. I don't know that they're going to be as good as this year with Allison Widener and Alexis Markowski, but there's some players out there. And then on the boys' side, we'll see. There's no Hunter Salas, I don't think, in the Nebraska boys' side, but there's some good players, including Jason Green, who Nebraska very much wants, out of Millwood North, and then Isaac Trout. So Isaac Trout's most likely going to visit Nebraska unofficially. just doesn't matter that much. He lives in Grand Island, so he's a big ticket guy. Nebraska very much wants him. Are they going to get him? I don't know. Creighton's going to be a big factor. Obviously, Creighton has a better basketball program right now than Nebraska. So we'll find out. We'll just have to see. Kansas will be in there too. So, Trout's a big ticket guy this year. Jason Green is too, and Nebraska wants him quite a bit. Should we talk some football?
Let's.
All right. Okay. Lots to go through with Husker football, but we're going to start here. Felt like this week, a lot of positivity surrounding, the offense, that they're doing some things better, that they're throwing the ball downfield more, which I think is an issue near and dear to Scott Frost's heart. He really wants them to do that. And it just feels like they feel lighter about what's going on, because I think they feel like the offense is closer to the vision that they had hoped to have always had, as it relates to, we want to run it, and then we really want to throw it. We really want to, bust it downfield and break things open.
Yeah, it's been interesting these last couple of weeks, because obviously the offense hasn't performed how fans or coaches or players have wanted it to the last couple of years. And so, I felt like early in spring, when we started hearing a little bit of optimism about the offense, there was still kind of this hesitation, this idea that I'm not going to get burned on this again, or we've heard this before. But it does seem like it's been a consistent message, from players and coaches, and they've been specific about what they like about it too, which I think is another sign that it's not just fluff, or it's not just good vibes, or whatever you want to call it. I mean, Cam Taylor-Britt saying the other day, as a corner, he said we actually are having to go downfield and defend now, as someone who's seen what the offense has been through for, since Scott Frost has been here. He's seen that evolution. So I thought that was notable. We got to meet Samari Toure for the first time and see what he's about. He looks 6'3". He looks the part of a Power 5 type pass catcher. And then I think, again, it's hard to brush past the fact that when you look at this wide receiver group, how many of these guys have had to learn on the fly in the last year? I mean, Oliver Martin was a guy who didn't even become eligible until mid-season, and he's settling in. Omar Manning, of course, with the various health issues, not able to stay on the field. Levi Falk was a transfer and new to the program who didn't have the benefit really of much of an off season. So it can sound like excuse making, and it can sound like we've been here before, but you look at the room, you see what some of these guys have done at other places, and it makes a lot of sense. These guys, they have a full spring of reps now. They have an established quarterback. I think it's okay to be cautiously optimistic about what the offense could be, knowing that it's had its troubles in the past. And just adding to the mix, hey, the offensive line has more talent and depth than it has under Scott Frost. The deep threats in terms of the personnel that can get behind a defense, there are more of those guys present than there were before. Xavier Betts is another good example of a guy who gets on campus and was thrown in for a handful of packages last year. He's got another year too. So it does seem like the personnel's there. It seems like the emphasis is more on that vertical threat. I know Oliver Martin had some good insight into that too, about how that's more of a priority now in the reads going through a play. So, I think it's okay to note that, yes, this offense has burned people in the past in terms of letting them down from what expectations were, but it does seem like they have the personnel and the emphasis that this thing could certainly improve from what it was last year.
Abby, what did Oliver talk about as it related to this what Evan's saying about this vertical routes and then looking at certain reads?
He talked a lot about how they're putting a big emphasis on that. And sorry, let me look. Okay, something I was thinking when you're talking about the wide receivers, is how it's also Matt Lubik's. That was his first year. So now he's had this offseason to fine-tune the receivers, and Frost has a lot of faith in him. So he's obviously also the offensive coordinator and the wide receivers coach. So he's been able to work more one-on-one with these guys. And like Evan said, there's a lot of them that it was their first year last year, and they were kind of just thrown into the mix, but now they've really been able to, work with what Lubick has, his knowledge, but then also I'm sure these tweaks that he's making because he has a lot of knowledge of that, position group.
So Martin, one of the things that he pointed out, which was good, and Oliver Martin is a quiet guy, but he said essentially that the receivers are getting open enough to whereas once maybe you looked at the deep route last, it wasn't open. Now maybe you're looking at it, like you're checking it, and maybe you give it a look. The Brandon Riley, Stanley Morgan, Kenny Bell, Quincy Enunwa tests. Like you know that the guy can get open, and so you're gonna eyeball that just quickly, not for 4 seconds. And we're not talking Tommy Armstrong era here. You're gonna eyeball it for a few seconds, and then if it's there, you're gonna throw it. Now, when you do that, you take a risk because it's not always the highest completion rate play. Simultaneously, if you hit it, it's a big reward. And when you're playing teams that play a lot of man-to-man coverage and are basically saying, F you, we're going to get up in your face and we're going to make you beat us. And we are not going to give you crap. You're not going to get your little 4-yard bubble or your little 7-yard hook. No, we're going to push you around and kick your butt. And if you want to do something about that, why don't you go 40 yards down the field and try? It's possible that Nebraska believes it has the receivers to be able to do that. Now, I'm not saying they could beat Ohio State's corners, but they might be able to beat some other team that thinks they're pretty special in coverage. And I think for many years, Nebraska struggled with this, even though Stanley Morgan was pretty good, and he got good at that midway through the 2017 season. They have not had a lot of elite one-on-one guys since Brandon Riley left the program in 2016. It's just been kind of a struggle.
It just seems like the excuses that have been there, or the impediments, or whatever, are kind of gone at this point. Like, the offensive line, you feel good about, like, providing that protection. Adrian Martinez, by all accounts, is healthy, is feeling good, is slimmed down. The tight end group is one of the more veteran position groups on the team, with Austin Allen and Travis Vokalek. And then again, you talk about this receiver group that's still young, that is going to have a full spring, more talent, bigger bodied guys that you feel better about throwing up a deep ball down the sideline on than, some of the smaller guys Nebraska's had in the handful of years. So it's like, at this point, what reason is there for it not to work for Nebraska? I mean, and really all you can come down to, I think, is if they don't have the right quarterback. I mean, I think that'd be the argument to say that it wouldn't work, is if he doesn't see or if he can't complete those. But then again, even this spring, we've consistently heard that Martinez has improved arm strength. Matt Lubick brought him up unprompted this last week about how he has taken things to another level in terms of his conditioning, in terms of his accuracy. And he was pretty accurate last year too, albeit in shorter passing type situations. So it just, you look at why it wouldn't work, and it seems like that list is shorter than it's been the last handful of seasons for sure.
Well, one thing I would say is that we know that Adrian can do it because he did it in 2018. He did. Nebraska's numbers in 2018 against Big Ten opponents, passing the football. This is in 9 Big Ten games. They threw the ball. It was 7.3 yards per attempt, which is pretty good. Anything over 7 is what you're looking for. 14 touchdowns to 6 interceptions. Not bad, though. 256 yards a game, 63.7% completion rate. That's pretty good. That's not bad. That's not bad. You'll take it. Now, in 2020, the percentage went up. Completion percentage went up to 68.1%, but the yards per attempt were 6.6. Not good. 6.6 is not where you want to be. Rutgers was 5.6. Iowa was 6.4. 5 touchdowns, 9 interceptions, not good. And 190 yards per game, which is not, that's not great. Now, some of that, I think, was on the fact that, you had a different quarterback for a couple of games, and he really liked running after the first read wasn't there. And the other thing is then you had, Martinez he completed a lot of passes, but they were really short. They were sort of what do you want to call it? A station group, so to speak, throwing the football. And so the 6.6, I'm sure Frost was like, oh my God, yeah, that's not going to work for us. They were 7.4 in 2019 in Big Ten play, which was actually higher than the 7.3. And then if you go back to Frost's UCF days, I mean, his first year at UCF was a sort of a small bore offense, but then they were pretty explosive in 2017. Of course, all of his offenses at Oregon were far more explosive than that. So I think Abby made a good point when she talked about Matt Lubick being the offensive coordinator. And I don't think that's a coincidence. I think Troy, obviously Troy Walters was the coordinator and he was a receivers coach too. I think there's a real emphasis on let's get really good receivers. Let's make sure those receivers are really good players because they're going to help us a lot. And I think Frost's belief in those receivers is such that he feels like his scheme and what his vision is going to work a hell of a lot better. And maybe you don't need an elite running back, but you do need elite receivers. I think that's part of his belief.
Well, and they've, getting skill positions to fit this vision has been tough for this offense over really Frost's time in Lincoln. I mean, you look at, they got Adrian Martinez, but recruiting quarterback behind them has been tough. They've struggled to hit on that dominant running back outside of Dedrick Mills. And even he was injured a lot of last year. And then receivers, we've talked about, guys have been hurt. Guys have been slow to learn the offense, whatever it might be. And so I think that's been part of the adjustment too, it's easier to have an explosive offense when you have explosive athletes. And for a variety of reasons, they just have missed on those guys to this point. But it does look like as they talked about last year, refocusing on, the kind of kid that can come from a coast and adjust to life in the Midwest is part of it. Getting bigger bodied kids certainly appears to be a priority in recruiting over what they did even 2 years ago. And so now it's time to see how that translates into success against Big Ten defenses. I think that's the other part is, man, you look at the annual Big Ten schedule and what defense do you see that you say, oh yeah, we're gonna run all over these guys. Like it's hard. It's hard to move the ball. It's hard to score. And so instead of, I think you've seen that pivot from let's find some shorter, faster guys to let's get some bigger guys and see how things can go from that vantage point.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree with that. Minnesota legitimately had a terrible defense last year, and Nebraska could not move the ball consistently on them. I mean, it was stark. I mean, Minnesota's defense was bad, and they were thin. They didn't have a lot of guys against Nebraska. This is how bad Minnesota's defense was last season. It's just last season. No, they gave up 6.9 yards of play.
That's #bad.
That's bad.
Oof.
That's terrible. How many yards per play they gave up to Nebraska? 4.74. Best performance they had all year. How did that happen? Anyway.
Brutal.
We have an open practice tomorrow, and we just posted a story on our site about the players that we're most looking forward to watching. I put 8, so you guys each contributed 2. I had 4, and I added a 4th because the 4th is the punter. A punter.
Yeah.
which I thought was important because, punting is good. But I thought we'd go through that list of players that we're going to be watching tomorrow, and then anything else we might be watching. Abby, I'll start with you. So you had the two players that you're most interested in seeing tomorrow. You are muted.
Oh, this is important, isn't it?
It is. Now you're go ahead.
So I had Gabe Irvin Jr. and Samori Torre. So since we've been talking about our receivers, let's go with a Torre. So basically, Nebraska really needs to find that number one guy that they can lean hard on. They didn't really have that last year. They had Wan'Dale Robinson, but they kind of used him in a weird hybrid way where he was inside a lot and being a running back. So they need, if their goal is to spread it out, so they need someone that can help spread that out and, make a long threat like they haven't had in recent years.
And he's tall. He is, sometimes you wonder how tall these guys are, when they say they're 6'3". He's 6'3". He's a tall guy.
Yeah, and he did really good at Montana, and they really liked what they saw from him. And he is, the reason he wanted to leave, one of them is because he thought that he can compete with the best corners in the country, in Power 5, in the Big Ten, and he wanted to prove that to himself and really thought that he could do that. So, he's been working with Cam Taylor-Britt in practice. They've been, working hard on each other, each of them trying to give their best so that they can both get better. But, I'm sure Nebraska really hopes that he can compete with those cornerbacks. And Cam Taylor-Britt, on the defensive side of the ball, he could be one of the best in the Big Ten.
Absolutely.
This year.
Mm-hmm.
So it'll be good for him to, really work one-on-one and push each other. But Nebraska really needs that man that they can rely on. And the things that they have been saying about him seem really positive, that he's fast, he's smart, he knows a lot about football because he's, a senior, he's a grad transfer. So, and the other receivers are impressed with what he can do too. And he's been, teaching them different route tricks because he's been in a different program. So they seem really high on him, not only the coaches, but his teammates.
And Irvin.
Yes. This is another one where, so Marquise Stepp, who they brought in to kind of fill this void that Dedrick Mills left, or just to carry the whole group. But he's out for the spring.
Yeah, so, and maybe longer than that. We don't.
So now they're having to adjust with who they have. And Stepp, I think he's technically a sophomore.
Yeah.
Yeah. So they have a super young group. But some people that have, been able to practice more, they haven't been as nicked up, are Gabe Irvin and then also Yant. So those two have really been, impressing. But especially Irvin, they talk a lot about, we talked about how they're so honest about how they feel about people. And they're really giving good details. Yes. So, with Irvin, they're he's really slippery. He can get through holes. He wants to be great. Matt Lubick said how, sometimes freshmen, when they mess up, they get really mad and then they just do terrible on the next play. But, Irvin's really good at learning, getting better, wanting to get better. He gets really, he gets upset when he's not doing his best. So I think that is something that they always look in someone. But it's going to be, good to have another guy that they can rely on. If Stepp doesn't, who knows if he'll play, who knows how well he'll play. But they have Irvin and they also have Yant, who have been, practicing a lot, getting a lot of reps. And then that's going to, speed up, further develop them this spring and then into the fall.
I'll be curious to see if Sevion Morrison practices tomorrow too. Morrison is different from really any of the backs, any of them. So I know they're high on his talent and his skill set. We'll see. Evan.
Yeah, Logan Smothers was one for me. The presumptive number 2 quarterback behind Adrian Martinez. Obviously, Martinez is entrenched as the starter but how does that backup position look? We've seen a little bit of Matt Masker over the years in the spring. Heinrich Harburg would be another guy that you could throw in there, though he's an early enrollee, and you wouldn't expect him to be up to speed, certainly with the offense after just a few months out of high school here to learn it. So to me, it's Logan Smothers and what has he learned and picked up in the last year. I mean, you think about his path to Nebraska, he committed way before that 2020 class came together. So we didn't see a lot of what his recruiting process could be. He was hurt late in his last high school postseason game, toughed it out. And then since then, he's been behind the scenes at Nebraska. I mean, he didn't get the benefit of a spring last year. By the time the season rolled around, the coaches were not looking for a quarterback competition with him. They were looking at Adrian Martinez and Luke McCaffrey and getting a season going. So he was a scout team guy. He traveled. He put on the headset every game. How does that all come together for him now this spring? You know, what's the accuracy look like? How quickly can he move plays? I think that'll be fascinating to watch because, again, it'll be the first chance outside of that 30-minute open media session that we've had to lay eyes on what he can do physically. And again, when you talk about the future of the quarterback position at Nebraska, a lot of it's going to come down to what that guy can show coaches this spring. Are they going to pursue somebody in the transfer portal, or is he going to perform at such a level that they feel like, okay, they're pretty comfortable with him as the number two if Martinez were to go down for some reason? So he's someone to watch for me. The other, Chris Kolarevic, I think I'm saying that close to right, Kolarevic, the inside linebacker transfer from Northern Iowa. He a ton of good things about him this spring. And he's interesting, I think, within a defense that has so much veteran leadership. He's one of the few guys who I think can come in and make a quick impact as a newcomer. I mean, we saw what he could do at UNI. Physically, he's as imposing and big as anybody in that second level for Nebraska. And he's getting extra reps, too, when you consider that Will Honus has been limited by that offseason groin surgery. And you have a lot of younger guys who are still kind of stepping into their own, Nick Henrich among them, who they're trying to bring along and stay healthy. And so you look at that kind of position that Colin Miller vacated last year as a captain. We get our first real look at Kolarevic and see what he can do. I think that'll help us to understand the defense all the more moving forward.
On the linebacker, I don't know if they knew for sure if Will Honus was going to come back or not. Will Honus is dealing with an injury. And Nick Henrich may be more needed at outside linebacker. I know that they moved Nick down at times. It could be a 3-man rotation at inside linebacker, especially if, Kolarevic. We need to figure out exactly how to say that name because I think we're going to be saying it a lot. They could have a 3-man rotation there with Reimer and Kolarevic and Honus. And be honest with you, Reimer and Honus have had their issues with health. They've been banged up at times. Now Reimer may be, physically bigger now. He looked bigger when he talked to us not long back, about a week ago. But nevertheless, and I think they probably need a third guy there. And then if they need to press Henrich back into it, they can. But I think Henrich can also help at outside linebacker. With Smothers, look, the bottom line is Logan Smothers has a lot of ability, physical ability as a runner. He's the coach's kid, so he understands football really well. The question with him is going to be throwing the football. Can he throw it? Can he throw the ball where it needs to go? Can he consistently have that sort of dynamic approach to things? Can he be good there? Can he push the ball downfield? Can he throw it hard? With Harburg, you're not going to have any questions about the athleticism piece or the throwing piece. Now Harburg's he's got a long, lanky body, so all the pieces got to be put together. But athletically, he's going to be good. And the question is going to be, can he learn the offense? And then once he learns the offense, when he does that, can he make all of the little, I don't want to say dinky, but the little precise throws in, from 0 to 10 yards and put all those on the spot? If you're asking me which guy can roll out and, get outside the pocket and find a guy crossing on a post 42 yards downfield and somebody's got to throw it 55 yards, Harburg can do that. I mean, He's got the physical capability because he's 6'6" and whatever he weighs to be able to throw almost anything in terms of just being able to do it. But in Nebraska's offense, they not only want a guy who can do that, but they want a guy who can throw it to the layers and throw it to the levels, so to speak. You've got to have a guy who can drop it in at that 15-yard mark. You've got to have a guy who can throw that quick bubble pass out, and it's got to throw it in the right spot. Because if you throw it, a yard and a half up, you're throwing it into a defender. If you throw it back, you got what happened in the first play in the Minnesota game where you're 2nd and 20 and, you're already behind the 8 ball. So all those little pieces put together, I think once Hoiberg does all that, I think he's going to be a really intriguing player with a high ceiling. Smothers is probably the better runner of the two. And we'll just have to see what he does on Saturday. Because I'm telling you, even though they run the hell out of their quarterbacks, deep down, they want to throw the football, and they don't want to run their quarterbacks 19 times a game. They don't. I don't believe they do. I just don't believe that's heart of hearts what they want to do. I think they want to run their quarterbacks 8 to 10 times a game and have them be effective runs where they're running 8 times for 72 yards, and one of those is a 37-yard touchdown, that kind of thing. I don't think they want to run their quarterbacks 19 times for 93 yards. But in order to do the things they want to do, they have to have a controlled, short passing game that is on point and efficient, and then they have to be able to throw it deep from time to time. So we'll just have to see. It's interesting, but I do believe that they really don't want to turn their quarterbacks into glorified running backs. My 4 guys were Daniel Cherney, and anybody can make a comment if they want about these 4. So my 4 were Daniel Cherney, who is a scholarship punter. You don't have those very often if they don't produce. So I'm guessing that Cherney's got to have a good spring, a good summer, and a good fall. It'll be important because the guy that recruited him isn't here anymore. Now, Australian punters have great reputations for being able to punt the ball a hell of a long way. My sense is Cherney can do that. Can he kick it a long way and kick it with a little bit of direction? Can he shape that punt? The thing that we've seen in the Big Ten, whether it's Tory Taylor at Iowa or Drew Chrisman, who just left Ohio State and is probably going to get picked in the NFL draft, or Blake Hayes at Illinois or Adam Korsak at Rutgers, is the placement of the football. They can put a touch on that thing. And these guys are just really gifted at putting the ball inside the 20, putting it inside the 10, pinning guys against the sidelines. Remember that punt that Tory Taylor had? It was tricky as hell. It was a good punt at Iowa that Cam Taylor-Britt fumbled. Britt had to move from somewhat of the center of the field. He had to move over. That ball was not far from the sideline. It was a tricky punt to field. It just was. Now, it's not an excuse. Taylor-Britt should have fielded it, but it wasn't an easy punt to go catch. And some of that is the skill set that the punter has. So Daniel Cherney is on that list. Evan, do you remember how much we used to talk about Blaise Gunnerson?
Quite a bit.
It feels like he's just sort of, and nothing's happened. I mean, he signed last year. COVID was a mess, turned everything into a mess. He wasn't going to play last year. And yet he's really flown under the radar.
He has. Well, he had the 2 hip surgeries, or at least one, and he's been hurt quite a bit. But when Nebraska got his commitment, that was a major kind of flag planting moment for recruiting in Iowa. One of those first big victories in that state that Nebraska had. And yeah, he's been hurt. We haven't really heard a lot about him. Honestly, I haven't heard a ton about him this spring either. I don't know if I've missed that. Maybe you guys have heard more, but just to see physically what he's all about. And I don't know that he's ready to be on the 2 deep or whatever, but if he can show that he's healthy and ready to start stacking some reps, yeah, he'd be someone I'm going to watch too.
Yeah, I got a feeling they need this guy to be good. I mean, they put a lot of effort into recruiting. He wasn't an easy guy to land. That Iowa State was in it, Iowa, other schools. And I think they're coaching him hard. They want him to be good. We'll see. I'm surprised that he just hasn't been brought up. Sometimes we in the media get very steered toward certain conversations. And we've been steered to the offense this year. But I'm telling you right now, Nebraska's losing a whole bunch of starters off that defense after this season. They don't get to come back for year 7. And they better. I mean, they've got some guys actually in the program, young guys, but those guys got to step up now. Because you throw them out to the Wolves, Big Ten offensive lines and Big Ten tight ends next year. That's not going to be pretty in 2022. When, by the way, the schedule is a lot more manageable than 2021. So that was my second guy. Who the hell else did I have here? Feldarius Payne. I think Feldarius Payne's probably in line for a good season. And by good, I mean, 6 to 8 sacks, 30 to 40 tackles, maybe 8 to 10 tackles for loss. I think he's going to be their best pass rusher. And he looks better. He looks a little bigger, which he probably needed to get a little bigger up top. And, there's some versatility there. They've kind of moved him to an outside backer role as a pass rusher, as opposed to trying to stick him inside at a 3-4 defensive end where guys can push on him.
Yeah, he's a guy that, I asked Eric Chenander, like who most benefits from a spring this year that didn't get one last year. And that was the guy that he brought up. I mean, he had the shoulder surgery coming from JUCO. He didn't really have a chance to benefit from the nutrition program or the strength program for a full off season. It was kind of patched together, and he showed flashes despite all that last fall. And so now he's healthy. He knows the scheme. Yeah, I can understand why they're excited about him as maybe exhibit A for a guy who was rushed through last year and all the strangeness of that COVID season. Now they know better where he fits within the scheme, like you said, moving from the line back to that outside linebacker spot. He should be fun to watch.
And the last one's Omar Manning. Maybe you got it right. Who does not want to see?
Is he real? Does he exist?
Buddy, he had one target at Northwestern. So yes, he is real.
I believe you're still the only media member to have talked to him, to quote him ever. I believe. Yes,
we have requested him this spring. I know other people have talked to him, but I was the only media member to get him after he committed because he didn't want to talk. And I was at a Casey's gas station when he committed, and I called him right the second he posted his thing on Twitter, and he talked. And then he said he was going to turn his phone off. My wife's Casey's Pizza. My wife likes Casey's Pizza, which is, she really does. It's one of her top, I don't know, nine pizzas. Right? Most of the others are in Omaha, right? So Lincoln is just a low option for her. But in Lincoln, she likes Casey's, a place for, gas and pizza. I had to leave the Casey's Pizza on the counter for like 5 minutes while I talked to Omar Manning. It's like that scene in Heat, where Robert De Niro says, do not have any attachment that you cannot walk out on in 30 seconds flat if you see the heat coming around the corner. Well, in this job, do not have any attachments or any pizzas that you cannot walk out 30 seconds flat if Omar Manning commits on Twitter and you're trying to call him. That's the discipline, as De Niro's character would say.
Not all heroes wear capes, Sam. That's good stuff.
So anyway, hey, I mean, the guy's got a lot of ability. He was a great junior college receiver. At the end of the day, everybody's going to be watching him. If he goes there and makes 2 big plays tomorrow, let's say he goes up and catches the ball over Cam Taylor-Britt or something, or he runs a big post and everybody can see how fast he is. The whole world's going to know. That's going to be the biggest takeaway from the practice. And it won't be fair because I don't think that's going to be the biggest thing that I take away from it. But fans are going to be there. And if that's what they see, oh my God. I mean, it's just, you feel for the kid because he has got a lot of ability, but man, people's expectations of him are just so high, and you hope people can temper it, even if he has some good plays, which again, everybody will know about. We'll see it. And then he'll make a great play, and then everybody in the whole state will know. So we'll see. Is there anything else you guys are watching for tomorrow that isn't necessarily player specific?
Well, I would just say, it's such a unique practice that's open. This isn't the spring game, so this isn't kind of the show of a scrimmage or a game or whatever. This is a practice for them. And, I guess I take the coaches at their word when they say they're not too worried about what people see. They're just going to go out and run their base stuff. And, I think it was the last year of the Mike Riley era, that spring, that we got to go see a scrimmage before the spring game. And oftentimes those are more telling than the actual spring game itself, because
Absolutely.
you get a better sense of depth charts and things of that nature. So I think just the unique window that we get this weekend, again, that's not the pomp and circumstance of the spring game, will be telling in how we kind of craft our view of this team. Because again, how much of how we view this team has come from what we've actually seen? Not a ton. The abbreviated season last year, otherwise it's been 30 minutes of them stretching and everything that coaches and players have said, along with a couple crumbs of social media videos. So this is a real opportunity, I think, to make some different judgments, to make some different observations. And we'll see how much that impacts kind of the view going forward. So I'm looking forward to something different.
Yeah. So I'm going to go on like a 37-second rant about the vanilla thing. Who cares? I mean, I don't even know what well, we're not going to show too much. Well, you were 3-5 last year. I'm not sure it matters what you show. Like, and I'm not even talking about the coaches. Like, of course you're not going to show too much. It isn't about that. Like, we've known this all camp. It's not about can you run your fanciest plays, and can the fancy plays, trick the defense. This has nothing to do with that. This is a team that had to get better at blocking, tackling, catching the football, putting the football in the right place, not fumbling, punting, kicking off. I mean, we're talking skills, not schematics. And so it surprises me that that's like what are you going to do over these 120 plays? You're going to show us everything you've got in the tank? Well, why would you do that? You want the guys to get good at the things, the bread and butter stuff. Nebraska football, and they know this. I mean, Scott Frost knows this. He's a smart guy. And so does Matt Lubick, all that. Greg Austin. Nebraska football's got to get better at the inside zone, the play that everybody runs. And Nebraska football's got to get better at throwing a deep pass, which is perhaps the least mysterious play in football, which is receiver on the edge of the field, run past the guy that's covering you, and either catch the ball on your back shoulder or in front of you. These are the things Nebraska has to get better at. They don't have to get better at being crafty. Like they're in a dead empty stadium at Rutgers and they had like 3 false starts. That ain't because the plays were untricky. It's because they had false starts. So it's surprising. Like these things come up a lot. Like, well, they're not going to show much. And the sport of football isn't necessarily about showing or not showing. When Alabama took Ohio State to the woodshed and beyond in the national title game, that wasn't because Alabama was throwing some tricky plays. They had a couple of pretty ones. But that was because Ohio State could not cover Alabama's receivers. They wouldn't have been able to cover them anywhere. In the backyard, anywhere. They couldn't do it. And at the end of the day, Ohio State prides itself on a certain kind of coverage scheme. And you can run a cover 3, split safety, or whatever you want to do. But if you can't cover their receivers, it doesn't matter what scheme you run. And so Nebraska's biggest issue hasn't been coaching in the schematics department. Scott Frost runs cool plays. I love his plays. They're fun to watch. It's been getting a holding penalty at the 2, which has nothing to do with the play. And so the thing that's good about practices is you get to see all the little things that add up to a good performance in a spring game or in a game. You get to watch one-on-one pass rush drills, which isn't about schematics. It's just about who beats who. You get to watch one-on-one receiver cornerback drills, which isn't about schematics. It's just about who beats who. And you get to watch 7-on-7 drills where basic things happen. Put the football where you need to put it. All those things. Those are the things that are fun to watch. And so that's why that practices are valuable. And Mike Riley did open up a lot of practices to us, especially on Saturdays. And it was valuable. And we got a sense of what they were good at and what they weren't good at. And what did we know? I remember writing about it. I think it was the year before you joined the beat, Evan. Like, we'd go to practice, we'd watch practice, and we'd be like, well, Riker 5's a better passer than Tommy Armstrong pretty much every day. So now that wasn't Tommy's fault. Tommy was a gamer and tough. And he had a leadership component to him that I think was rare. But we also knew Nebraska was going to struggle to throw the football because we watched it. And we knew. It was, And so when did that matter? When did that matter? It mattered on the final drive at Wisconsin when they could not make the plays. It mattered in overtime against Wisconsin when they could not make the plays. That's when that translates. You go to those games and you're like, they're going to lose. They can't make these plays. They couldn't finish that game. They wouldn't finish that game at Wisconsin. Maybe Mike Riley was still in Nebraska. You just never know because they played for the Big Ten championship. And they might beat Penn State. They might. They didn't have to play Ohio State. So. But that's the things that you learn when you watch practice all the time. You see things over and over and over again, and then like, oh, that's why it happens in the game. Want to talk some recruiting?
Yes.
All right.
I'm going to listen to some recruiting.
All right. Abby, you talked to, how do you say his last name? Kanik?
That's what I think.
Yeah, and then Gavin Myers. Jaron Kanik and then Gavin Myers. These guys are coming up for the spring game and for the June 4th official visit. Now, by the way, that's the first Friday Night Lights camp. And Nebraska has, I believe, now 8 official visitors, and we'll go over that in a moment. But I'd love for you to talk, Abby, just a little bit about these 2 guys from Hays, Kansas, a stop on Interstate 70 on the way to Colorado.
First off, well, Jaron Kanik, is that what we're deciding his last name is?
I believe so.
Sure. Kanik, they use him like everywhere. They went to Hays High School and they used him like everywhere. Like outside, he was a receiver. They used him as a running back. He even took some snaps at quarterback where it was just a design run play. And he's like really fast. On the first, he clocked like a 10.66.
Yeah, that's
like
fast.
100 meter. And
that's Eric
if you
Crouch
watch him,
fast, by the way, people.
Yeah.
That's Nate Gary fast.
Yeah.
Nathan Gary. Sorry.
Mm-hmm. He's 210. So that's, and just when you watch him on Twitter, he posted his, race, and he really outlegs everyone, but he just moves really well with his weight, which he thinks is like one of his big strengths. And I think Nebraska needs that. They are recruiting him for either side of the ball. I don't think they've really decided. It'll be interesting to see where they choose to put him because I'm, thinking about that running back, spot right there where we're not really sure what's going to happen there, who's going to pan out, who's going to keep on, developing those young guys. So it might be interesting to put like a bigger back there because that's what, the Big Ten requires is some big backs that, he's fast, he can move people. So that'll be interesting to see. And then on, the other side of the ball, they have Myers, who is a inside linebacker. And he seemed, really excited about Nebraska. He was a little more animated. That might just be, part of his personality. But these 2 guys, they're best friends. They grew up in elementary school. They talk a lot about, going to the same school together. We'll just see what happens, but it's a possibility. And they're, they have their official visits together at Nebraska and then also at Kansas State. And I think what's really going to come down to, like, all of the official visits that Karnick has set up are Midwest schools. Kansas State, Iowa, Nebraska. So it's really going to come down to like how they're going to use him, where they're going to use him, because Nebraska hasn't really like told him that. And so just to kind of see how, Nebraska lands these guys, and they already have, this connection, and it might be a pull for Karnick, who, has an offer from Iowa to, come to Nebraska because his best buddy's could come with him.
Mm-hmm. Evan, you want to guess how fast Nate, Finn, Gary ran the 100 in, I'm just making all kinds of mistakes. Do you want to guess how fast Nathan Gary ran the 100 in high school in South Dakota?
I have no idea. Why don't you tell me?
Yes. That's what I'm trying to. You want to guess, Abby? You remember Nathan Gary?
Yes, I do. I don't know, 10:57.
10-28. I'm sorry. Yeah. I'm sorry. Not, yeah. Yep.
Holy moly.
10-28. So this kid from Kansas isn't as fast as Nathan was, but he's fast. Gary was an elite athlete. He played safety, as people might recall. He also played linebacker. I could see this kid playing JoJo Doman's role at Nebraska. He's faster than Doman. I don't know that he has Doman's instincts or his savvy as a player, but he's probably faster. And they could use a guy like this because he's fast enough to be a safety. Let's be clear. I mean, that's when you run a 10-600, unless you have hips of stone, you're fast enough to be a safety. And what they kind of want from that position is somebody who is physical and flexible and also athletic enough to kind of do a bunch of different things. So I feel like that would be his best position. Maybe they want to play him at receiver. I don't really know, but I feel like that, whatever they call JoJo's position, which is sort of a nickel, that's the position that he would be really good at. And right now, JoJo's backup at that spot is either Javen Wright or Isaac Gifford, two very different kind of players. Javen Wright is a long, lanky, sort of 6'3", 200 and something outside linebacker-ish guy, whereas Isaac Gifford is more of a compact, he's a little bit closer to Doman's size and probably a little bit better in coverage. It feels like this kid from Hayes could slot right in there just beautifully into that spot. So we'll see what Nebraska does. And he's going to come up, right, Abby, for the spring game and for June 4th, right?
Correct. Both of them are.
Very interesting. So Nebraska has at this point now 8 slotted official visitors for that June 4th experience, which is going to be the Friday Night Lights, and they'll have like a Big Red Weekend and that. The 2 guys from Hayes, Maumelle, Arkansas defensive tackle Nico De Valliere. That is a suburb of Little Rock, and he has a teammate that's going to Arkansas. So De Valliere's got really good offer list. Jalen Marshall, who's kind of new, he would be a defensive end in Nebraska's system. He's from St. Thomas Aquinas, Overland Park. So he's on the Kansas side of Kansas City, down south part of Kansas City, Kansas, south of Kansas City, Kansas, down in Overland Park. James Mons. Now, this is an important one. He is heavily recruited by Nebraska, Michigan State, Indiana, Mississippi State, and maybe one other school. This kid reminds me a lot of Tywan Mullen, who went to Indiana and was an All-American last year. Nebraska was one of his final 2. He picked IU, and he's really good. James Mons, same size, very similar skill set, and Indiana's in there. Indiana, Michigan State, Nebraska, those are probably going to be your final 3. Chase Androff, I can't tell you a lot about him. He's a tight end from Minnesota. He just announced this morning while we were recording our podcast that he was going to visit. He's not as good as the 2 guys at Bellevue West who aren't coming to Nebraska. So they're going other places. So Nebraska is going to have to look for other tight ends. Chase Androff is one of those guys. Of course, you wish Caden Helms or Michael Riley Ducker would change their mind, but Nebraska's got to move forward. They can't do anything about guys who don't want to come to Nebraska. Justin Williams, a compact, physical running back from down in the Atlanta area, in the Georgia area. He's coming up here. That'll be interesting. He's got a pretty good offer list too. Again, kind of a compact guy. I don't know who I'd necessarily compare him to on Nebraska's roster. He's thick. He's got some size to him. Not the tallest guy in the world. And Dallas is, let's see, northwest of Atlanta. And then a really intriguing player, Popeye Williams from Westfield, Indiana. That's a big one for Nebraska. He's sort of a pass rusher type. He just got MVP, defensive line MVP at an Under Armour camp out in, I can't remember exactly where, but he just got a defensive line MVP out there, and Nebraska is one of his top teams. And he would be a really nice addition as a pass rusher. I think that's a guy that worth watching. I think a lot of the guys that they have coming in for this June 4th event are probably guys that they have a pretty good chance at, and then they would probably take one of the 2 defensive tackles between De Valliere and Marshall. James Mons is a big one. That's a really big one. And so we'll see if they're able to land him. As I've said before, Evan knows this. Evan has said it before. Nebraska's coaches can recruit. They have managed to effectively sign 3 top 20 classes in a row. And they've not been able to do that on a great deal of on-field success. They're good at what they do. They're good recruiters. And I don't say that to be Pollyannish. Both recruiters weren't. So these guys are, though. And they do a pretty good job of finding guys. And the other thing they do is with covering recruiting with this staff is you don't exactly know who they have the best relationships with because they don't really put it out there, so to speak. And then all of a sudden some guy's like, I'm going to visit. And you're like, who's this guy? We weren't looking at this guy. And then all of a sudden this guy shows up. You're like, wow. And for me, that was Justin Williams. Like I wouldn't have guessed that was the top running back that was going to be visiting first, but he's a pretty good player. Pretty good. I like his skill set. Anyone have any thoughts on recruiting? Any others?
You talk about quarterback situation. It sounds like MJ Morris.
Yeah. We can. So MJ Morris is going to visit for the spring game. I've gone back and forth with him a little bit. We'll have more on him the week of the spring game. He's going to visit Nebraska for the spring game. He's probably going to make a decision after that. So I don't know that he's going to go through the official visit process. I think he's probably going to make a decision prior to the June stuff opening up, which is interesting. He plays baseball. So that's probably part of the decision-making process there is I think he'll probably be playing baseball in the summer. He is by far the highest rated quarterback that Nebraska is still in the mix with. And, it's an eclectic group of teams that he's probably going to have in his final group. It's going to be Florida State, which already has a quarterback commit, and Nico Marichal. And there's an interesting story with that kid because, I don't know, his brother camped at Nebraska. But Nebraska targeted that guy, and then that guy picked Florida State. Florida State's going to be in his top group. North Carolina State, Tim Beck is there. Georgia Tech, hometown Georgia Tech, will be in the mix too. And then probably Nebraska. And, Nebraska's going to get the last crack because I think he's going to visit the other places first. And so he'll end up, Nebraska will get the last swing of the bat. So it's a wonky swing because, again, he's not going to be able to kind of hang out with the coaches. They might be able to set up an impromptu Q&A session with players, off campus at Laszlo's or some restaurant, but you can't really host the guy until June 1st. And so May 1st is before that. Coaches, Brett Bielema made a funny line. I've been listening a lot to his press conferences where he's like, all I can do is stand in the glass doorway and kind of wave at him, he can wave at him while he's talking to him on the phone. Like, that's the best he can do. I've got to stand in there looking at him, making sure they're the right size, but I can't really talk to him. I can't meet with him, So, they're standing outside, and, they're, 25 feet away, and it's just really strange. And wasteful. The NCAA should have gotten rid of this back in May. I don't know why they didn't. Or back in, March. Anyway, so he's going to visit, and then Richard Torres, we'll see. That's another one, but he probably will take official visits. I feel like he has time. So I suspect he'll take official visits. Those are really the top 2 guys on Nebraska's list that I'm aware of. But again, Nebraska's tricky. They started, I think they're doing their homework on about 4 or 5 other guys that I don't think they'll hesitate to offer if it comes to it. But I'm sure they'd love to get the 2 guys that they, have at the top of the list. And then, of course, you're always thinking transfer quarterback. The portal, there are quarterbacks in the portal. There isn't the magical unicorn 5th-year senior who's happy with being a backup to Adrian Martinez. That I don't know that option is available. But, there's a redshirt freshman or 2 in there.
Yeah.
Now, you bring in that guy, and then you're basically telling your other quarterbacks already on the roster, you're telling them kind of 2 things. So, one, you're saying, we feel like you need competition. We're not sold on you guys being the future. And then the other thing, every single time you bring in a quarterback, what happens? Now, Mario Verduzco is a good teacher. I get it. But every single time you bring in a quarterback, what happens is that guy needs reps, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you're not rotating like there's not two quarterbacks on a play. Like you might have two quarterbacks in two different groups, but if you're going to bring a guy in, that guy needs time. And so that takes away reps from a Hoiberg or a Smothers. And that's the delicate balance, is that you're bringing in a guy that you're basically saying, in order for us to figure out if this guy can run our offense, he has to do that in practice. And especially if you give him a scholarship. And, that's why I'm always surprised that Nebraska says they want 5 scholarship running backs or quarterbacks on the roster. Cause I'm like, you have to give them all reps, which is a lot,
And in the era of the transfer portal, that's going to be hard to keep all those guys happy.
Like on some level, you're like, we gave that guy 737 reps and he left.
Mm-hmm.
That stinks. Like, what do we give McCaffrey all those snaps for if he's just going to leave? That kind of thing. But that's life. That's the way it goes. With the new transfer waiver process, these kids can skedaddle under almost any condition or circumstance.
Yep.
The day's going to come. It hasn't come yet. But the day's going to come when Nebraska has its equivalent of Christian Bishop at Creighton. Christian Bishop at Creighton was arguably Creighton's second best player. I think Zagorowski was their best player. But Bishop was damn good, and he was really good in the NCAA tournament and leading them to the Sweet 16. Bishop's leaving. Now, there's probably extenuating circumstances that we don't need to get into about why. Obviously, Creighton had a difficult year, and there were issues with the coach and all that. But he's still a really good player who's leaving to go somewhere else, perhaps Kansas. And so inevitably what you think about is really good players are leaving programs that value them and played them as much as they wanted to play, and they're leaving anyway. Invariably and inevitably, that's going to hit Nebraska football. There's going to be a 2-year starter who puts up really nice numbers and is going to be a junior. And some school is going to come along and say, you want to come play for us? We won 10 games last year. If we add you, maybe we'll play for the national championship. And that player might just say yes.
Maybe. I mean, we've seen it already with Wan'Dale Robinson.
We did. Well, yes. I mean,
he was the face of the program. He was getting as much playing time as he wanted.
Exactly. I would say that Wan'Dale's transfer had multiple facets to it. And I think Wan'Dale would say that he wasn't doing what he wanted to do here. I'm talking about a guy that was used exactly the way that he was supposed to be used and was thrilled with his time, which I think Bishop was, generally speaking, at Creighton, who leaves anyway, not just to go play for a better team. Like, just, I'm going to go play for this team over here because I want to do that. Conversely, I could see Nebraska doing it. I could see them doing it and getting a kid off a team. And I'm not talking Kalaveric. I'm talking, another Division I team, maybe even a team in the Big Ten. Hey, you want to come here and let's say Nebraska gets pretty good here in the next couple of years and they go 9-4 and 10-3. What's going to stop them from going to the parent of a kid at Purdue, which is getting, dirt kicked in its face and saying, hey there, Purdue receiver, want to come to Nebraska? Like, isn't that part of what's going to happen now? Isn't that part of what a coach needs to do in terms of due diligence? Won't they have 2 boards? Board 1, high school kids. Board 2, college kids that we'd like to transfer to our school. Board 3, kids we're worried about losing to other schools.
Yes. I mean, Nick Saban said as much just recently. I mean, they're going to be looking at other guys just like that. Yeah, that's the new reality of this thing.
This is true free agency. The NFL doesn't even have this. Patrick Mahomes can't leave the Kansas City Chiefs. Well, let's not use Mahomes. He's under contract again. Justin Herbert can't leave the San Diego Chargers and go play for the New England Patriots. He can't do that. He can't just say, I'm going to transfer. Goodbye. I'm going to go play for Belichick and the Patriots. Your defense sucks. Theirs doesn't. I'm going to play for them. You can't stop me. Like, that doesn't happen in the NFL. Like, Justin Herbert would have to sit out for 3 years. Or, New England would have to give San Diego a king's ransom to get it. Like, New England would have to give them, we will give you all of our draft picks for the next 5 years. You can have Justin Herbert. There you go. In college, there's no such rule. How is that going to work? It's total free agency.
Yep. And let's throw NIL into there too, just to see what happens. It's insane.
And that, in theory, I could see NIL helping stop as much transfers, because if a school does a really good job of developing your brand and you feel like you're okay, maybe I'm not playing as much as I want, but man, they really value me as a person and they're doing a good job of helping me make a little bit of money. Do I want to transfer to this school where I'm going to be like the 73rd guy on their list? Maybe they don't do that for me.
Yeah.
And is it possible that you could have NIL rules written that say, if you leave in your first 2 years, you forfeit X% of your money that you gained through NIL? Is that possible?
Could be.
Like, let's say you sign a 2-year agreement with, a truck dealer. Pick your favorite truck, I don't know, whatever truck you want to pick. And you sign a 2-year, deal with them. Well, that truck dealer is not going to care, isn't going to get anything from you if you transfer to Kentucky. So the truck people are like, listen, if you leave, you forfeit all of this. You can't leave. Or you don't get any of it. I think there's a possibility that NIL actually keeps people in place.
Could be. Could balance it out, man. It's going to be, there's so many games within the games at this point. It's not just football. It's all the roster management. It's the social media. It's everything else. Think about how different it was even 5 years ago. College football. It's unbelievable.
I know. It's something. Do you like the changes, Evan?
Some of them. I mean, I get like wanting to be friendly for student athletes and this idea that other students can make money and profit from their name, image, and likeness. But man, I don't know. By the same token, like if I, as a high school or college age kid, was able to transfer or to just jump into a new situation, because I felt like it on that given day or that given week, I don't know that would have been the best thing for me. And I don't know that it's the best thing for a lot of these guys now who jump into the portal and they may not come out the other side, or they may come out into a situation that's different. And how many college football stories over the years have we had of guys who stuck out whatever adversity or stuck through whatever adversity was going on and came through better on the other end of it. I don't know that this experience is going to be quite that when you go into the portal and you end up somewhere else. So it's tough. I think if nothing else, it really makes you value having a support system. If you're a recruit coming in, you better have some family support. You better have some people in your ear advising you well, because if you don't, like, the system now is set up to really chew you up and spit you out if you make some rash decisions.
That's a good point. Who's going to be the guy on Nebraska baseball's team that's going to most benefit from NIL? I got a person in mind, but I'm curious what you think.
Well, eventually it could be Drew Christo, who's coming in. In-state guy, marketable. It's funny because those guys really are not all that active on social media at all. They for the most part, they're content to kind of do their thing, and they don't garner nearly the social media following that football or basketball does, or that sort of thing. Spencer Schwellenbach certainly has that potential, but he's only going to be playing another month or so with Nebraska before he goes pro.
All of a sudden you make a College World Series and that changes real fast.
What's that? What changes?
If Nebraska made a College World Series, it'd change real fast.
Oh, in terms of popularity? Yeah.
Yeah.
Sure. Yes.
All of a sudden, what brand of eyewear Max Anderson wears matters.
Yeah, that's true.
That's part of what happens. Team has success, individual players on them. I mean, Jabba Chamberlain, he would have made bank.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of money.
Shane Comine, same.
Oh, yeah.
Alex Gordon. Yep.
Probably. Alex doesn't strike me as a guy that wants to endorse anything. So he's kind of an introvert guy, but Jabba would have been, he would
from
have
a personality standpoint, yes.
Yeah, he would have been about 6 different prizes. He'd have been great. That would have been awesome.
That's true.
Ken Harvey, he would have made a lot of money. He was before the CWS teams, but he's another.
True. Yeah, that's kind of a fun exercise to go back and think like who 20 years ago would have been prime candidates for this.
Oh, Johnny Dorn would have been on billboards in Grand Island, all that.
Johnny Rogers in the 70s, man.
Oh yeah, that's right. Oh well, yeah, yep, probably.
Imagine if he had social media. Holy cow!
That's right. All right, this has been a good conversation. We're going to cover the open practice tomorrow for everybody that's going to be watching along, reading along. So read our coverage on Omaha.com, the World-Herald, Big Red Today. For Abby Barmore and Evan Bland, I'm Sam McKewon. Thanks for listening to the Pick Six podcast. We'll be back next week. We'll find something to talk about. Take care.